After the show, Elvis spotted a fan who hadn't eaten in days and quietly brought her backstage. He thought no one would notice, but by the next morning, over 2,000 people were gathered at the gates of Graceland. In this video, you'll see how one act of kindness turned into a story that swept across the country, and why it changed the way fans saw the king forever. Her journey to that backstage door began with desperation that few could imagine. A young woman from out of state had somehow slipped past security at the Memphis Coliseum that night. She'd been surviving in her car for days, parked behind a truck stop on the interstate. The back seat was her bed. A gas station bathroom was her only place to wash up. She hadn't eaten a real meal in nearly a week. Just months earlier, she'd been working multiple jobs to make ends meet. Then, everything collapsed at once. Lost hours, rising rent, and too much pride to call home for help left her with nowhere to turn. She'd spent her last money on that concert ticket. Not her last spending money, her last money, period. But Elvis wasn't just entertainment for this young fan. His music had been her companion through every hardship. When bill collectors called, she played Don't Be Cruel. When loneliness hit, she put on Love Me Tender. His songs reminded her that someone who grew up poor in Mississippi could make something of himself. If Elvis could rise from nothing, maybe she could too. The hunger was getting worse. She'd found loose change in her car and bought a candy bar days earlier. By Thursday morning, dizzy spells and gnawing pain made her consider calling her parents. Then she remembered the concert ticket tucked in her purse. She could sell it. The thought crossed her mind as she sat in that truck stop parking lot. Someone would pay good money for an Elvis ticket. She could eat for a week on what she'd get for it, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. This might be her only chance to see him perform. The decision to sneak backstage wasn't planned. She'd watched the security guards during the show, noticed their patterns, seen how they moved between the corridors. When the final encore ended, she spotted an unguarded side entrance. Her heart was pounding as she walked through that door, but her legs kept moving. She hoped he would understand. Elvis's story made her believe that someone who'd grown up in a two-room house in Tupelo would recognize the desperation in her eyes. He'd known hunger as a child. He'd worked odd jobs before he made it big. Getting backstage was only the beginning. What happened when Elvis first encountered this unexpected visitor would change everything. Elvis emerged from his dressing room still wearing his white jumpsuit, sweat on his forehead, and hair slightly messed from the performance. The backstage area buzzed with post-show chaos as band members packed instruments and crew rolled equipment toward the exits. In the middle of it all stood the young woman, looking completely out of place in her wrinkled clothes and hollow cheeks. She'd made it past the first corridor, but now 2 security guards were walking straight toward her. Her heart hammered in her chest. She'd come this far, but it was over. The guards were 3 steps away when witnesses say Elvis stepped forward and intervened. Elvis walked closer, studying the fan's face. He didn't recognize her, but he recognized something else. The hollow look in her eyes, the way she held herself, the slight tremor in her hands. He'd seen it before in his own mirror as a child in Tupelo. He'd seen it in his mother's face during the worst times. Those who were there later recalled Elvis asking if she was all right. The young woman's voice came out as a whisper. She apologized for being there, explaining she just wanted to see him perform. When he reportedly asked when she'd last eaten, her cheeks turned red. She looked down at her shoes and admitted it had been days. Elvis was quiet for a moment. The backstage chatter seemed to fade around them. He was remembering his childhood home, where dinner sometimes meant sharing 1 can of beans between 3 people. He thought about his mother Gladys working extra shifts at the hospital laundry, coming home exhausted but still making sure he had something to eat. He led her to a small room where catered food was laid out on tables. Sandwiches, fruit, cookies, coffee. Elvis grabbed 2 plates and started filling them both. He handed one to the fan and sat down across from her at a folding table. Road crew members later recalled how he encouraged her to eat, taking a bite of his own sandwich first. The young woman stared at the plate. Her hands shook as she picked up half a sandwich. The first bite brought tears to her eyes, not just from hunger, but from the kindness of this moment. Elvis wasn't treating her like a charity case or a crazy fan. He was eating with her like she was a friend. The room fell quiet as he invited her to sit and eat. Band members stopped their conversations. Security guards watched in silence. Everyone present was witnessing something they'd never seen before. Their boss, the king of rock and roll, sharing a meal with a stranger who had nothing. Elvis didn't ask questions about how she'd gotten backstage or why she was hungry. He just made sure she ate. When she finished her sandwich, he pushed the fruit toward her. When she finished that, he offered cookies. For several private minutes, they sat together in that small room. What none of them realized was that this simple act of compassion wouldn't stay private for long. Word was already beginning to spread through the tight network of people who worked with Elvis, and once it reached the fan community, everything would change. By midnight, witnesses later recalled that word was spreading through the Elvis fan community faster than anyone had ever seen. Road crew members were making calls from truck stops. The young woman herself had driven straight to a diner to call friends back home, crying as she described what had happened. The story moved through fan club networks across the South like electricity through wire. This wasn't ordinary fan gossip about what songs Elvis sang or what jumpsuit he wore. The people hearing this story felt something deeper stirring inside them. For many fans, this proved their belief that Elvis hadn't forgotten his roots, and it moved them to act. They'd defended him for years to critics who called him just another flashy performer. Now they had concrete evidence that the man they'd believed in all along was exactly who they thought he was. The phone calls started a chain reaction that moved faster than anyone expected. Fan club presidents were dialing their member lists. Groups of friends who'd attended the Memphis show together were calling everyone they knew. Each person who heard the story felt compelled to share it. The details grew richer with each telling, but the core message stayed the same. Elvis had seen someone in need and responded with pure human kindness. Something was building in living rooms and kitchens across multiple states. Fans started making plans they'd never made before. Groups decided to drive to Memphis together. Individuals cleared their weekend schedules. Some wanted to thank Elvis personally for restoring their faith in decent people. Others felt a need to show solidarity with anyone else who might be struggling. Many couldn't explain exactly why, but they knew they had to be part of whatever was happening. The organizing happened without any central coordination. Fan clubs decided to bring flowers to Graceland. Other groups started collecting food to donate. Friends made signs thanking Elvis for his compassion. Nobody was talking to each other, but everyone was moving toward the same destination for the same reason. Phone calls continued through the early morning hours. People who hadn't spoken in months were reconnecting over this story. Strangers were becoming allies united by their shared admiration for what Elvis had done. The movement was growing beyond anyone's ability to track or control it. By 3 a.m, cars were already on highways heading toward Memphis. Hotel rooms were being booked. Work schedules were being rearranged. Gas tanks were being filled. Hundreds of people who'd gone to bed as individual Elvis fans were waking up as part of something much larger than themselves. They were driven by their hero's example of putting compassion into action. By dawn, enough people had heard the story to create something no one at Graceland expected. Cars from different states were already pulling up along Elvis Presley Boulevard, their occupants carrying flowers, homemade signs, and food to share. What began as individual arrivals quickly transformed into something unprecedented at Graceland. Early that morning, people began arriving at the gates. Within hours, the line along Elvis Presley Boulevard stretched for blocks and included visitors from neighboring states. License plates told the story of how far people had traveled. Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee. Cars kept coming from every direction, creating an impromptu gathering that nobody had planned but everyone understood. Security at Graceland was confused and concerned as the crowd kept growing throughout the morning. Unlike anything they'd seen before, the usual tour groups didn't arrive until 10 o'clock, and this wasn't tour season anyway. These people weren't trying to get inside. They were standing quietly outside the gates, holding flowers, homemade signs, and covered dishes. Security radioed the main office multiple times before 8 o'clock, asking for instructions nobody could give them. The gathering included veterans wearing their service caps and young mothers holding babies while their husbands unloaded folding chairs from truck beds. College students sat on car hoods, sharing coffee from thermos bottles. This wasn't a demanding mob seeking attention or autographs. The atmosphere was peaceful, almost reverent. People spoke in quiet voices. Children played gentle games between the cars. When someone needed directions to a bathroom or gas station, strangers offered help immediately. Traffic began backing up on Elvis Presley Boulevard by 9 o'clock. Local news crews arrived after receiving calls from confused residents. Channel 3 sent a reporter who interviewed several people, trying to understand what was happening. The neighbors came out of their houses to witness the spectacle. Some brought lawn chairs to their front yards. Others offered to let people use their bathrooms. People started sharing their own stories of struggle as the morning progressed. A factory worker from Jackson talked about losing his job 6 months earlier. A single mother from Little Rock described raising 3 kids on minimum wage. A retired teacher explained how her pension barely covered her medications. They found connection with complete strangers through Elvis's example of recognizing need and responding with kindness. Reported acts of generosity began happening throughout the crowd. People held flowers and quietly shared food and stories. Children held hand-drawn thank you cards with messages like, "Elvis, you're the best," and "Thank you for being nice." Veterans stood together near the music gate, sharing stories about how Elvis's music had helped them through difficult times overseas. The large crowd became a testament to how one act of kindness can inspire collective action and community. People who had never met were hugging each other. Strangers were exchanging phone numbers. The crowd had transformed from individual Elvis admirers into a unified community of people committed to following their hero's example of compassion. But the most remarkable part wasn't the size of the crowd. It was what happened when word reached Elvis himself. Would he see them? And if he did, what would he do? According to some accounts, Colonel Parker contacted Elvis at Graceland around 10 that morning, his voice tight with concern. The crowd outside the gates had grown throughout the morning. Traffic was backed up for miles. Local news crews were setting up cameras. Elvis listened quietly, then hung up the phone and walked to his bedroom window. Witnesses said he could see the crowd from there, stretching along Elvis Presley Boulevard in both directions. Sources later described concern among staff about crowd control and liability. If Elvis acknowledged this gathering, would fans expect the same response every time someone needed help? Would Graceland become a charity headquarters? Vernon Presley reportedly expressed worries about setting a precedent. The staff waited for Elvis to make a decision that could change everything about how he interacted with his fans. Elvis saw something more important than crowd control. He understood that these people hadn't come to ask for anything. They had traveled hundreds of miles to express gratitude and solidarity. This was about community, not celebrity. According to those present, he told his security team to open the gates and let him walk among the people. The decision shocked everyone there, but Elvis was certain it was right. Witnesses said Elvis later appeared at the gates wearing casual clothes. No jumpsuit, no stage makeup, just jeans and a button-down shirt. The crowd grew quiet as he approached. He walked slowly among the people, shaking hands, accepting flowers, listening to their stories. A woman from Birmingham thanked him for showing that famous people could still be decent. A veteran from Jackson said Elvis reminded him why America was worth fighting for. Those who were there recalled Elvis spending considerable time outside those gates talking to individuals in the crowd. He learned about their struggles, their families, their hopes. Many shared their own experiences with hunger and hardship. Others talked about how his music had helped them through difficult times. The conversation wasn't about his career or his fame. It was about shared humanity and the responsibility that comes with influence. The transformation in Elvis himself was visible to everyone who knew him well. Seeing how his private act of kindness had inspired public acts of community and compassion changed his perspective on his role as a public figure. He realized his true power wasn't in selling records or filling concert halls. It was in his ability to inspire human connection and encourage people to help each other. The ripple effects continued long after that day. Fan clubs across the South began organizing charity drives to help struggling members of their communities. People who met at Graceland that morning formed lasting friendships. The bonds created by Elvis's example of compassion extended far beyond his music or his fame. Some accounts say Elvis kept in touch with the young fan whose hunger had started it all. Fans later said they organized support for her. Job offers reportedly came from Memphis businesses. Her story became part of a larger narrative about what genuine kindness could accomplish. This single moment would define how people remembered Elvis long after the music stopped playing. Years later, when people asked what made Elvis truly special, those who were there that day had a different answer than most. They didn't talk about his voice or his moves or the way he commanded a stage. They talked about a hungry girl and a plate of food, and the moment they realized their hero was exactly the man they'd hoped he would be. For many who were there, the story crystallized what they believed about Elvis's authentic character that went far beyond his public persona and stage performances. While millions knew him as the king of rock and roll, the people at Graceland that morning witnessed something deeper. They saw a man who never forgot where he came from, who carried the lessons of his childhood poverty into his adult success. Most celebrities use their fame to create distance between themselves and ordinary people. They build walls, hire security, live in protected worlds where real problems can't touch them. Elvis did the opposite. He used his influence to bridge gaps, to connect with people who were struggling, to prove that success hadn't made him forget his roots. This moment showed fans that small acts of compassion could influence entire communities to examine their own capacity for kindness. Many biographers and fans point to Gladys Presley's influence as shaping his empathy. She'd raised him in a two-room house in Tupelo where neighbors helped neighbors survive, where sharing what little you had wasn't charity, it was just what decent people did. Those values stayed with Elvis even when he could afford anything he wanted. Money changed his circumstances, but it didn't change his character. The broader significance reaches far beyond one backstage encounter. For his fans, Elvis proved that celebrities could use their platform to inspire positive change rather than just entertain. He showed that fame came with responsibility. That influence meant something more than selling records or filling concert halls. That real power lay in the ability to make people believe in kindness again. The lasting impact continued for decades after that morning at Graceland. Fan clubs across the country started charity drives to help struggling members of their communities. People who met at those gates formed friendships that lasted years. The tradition of compassion spread through the Elvis fan community like his music had spread through popular culture. It became part of their identity. How those fans remembered Elvis transcends celebrity culture completely. Small acts of kindness, regardless of someone's status or wealth, can create movements that outlast fame. A single gesture of human decency can inspire thousands of people to examine their own capacity for compassion. The ripple effects can continue long after the initial moment has passed. The story at Graceland became one of those moments fans tell to show the man behind the legend. It proved that heroism isn't about grand gestures or dramatic rescues. It's about recognizing human need when you see it and responding with dignity and love. It's about treating every person as if they matter, regardless of their circumstances or status. What happened that morning revealed something profound about the power of genuine compassion to create unexpected community. The crowd that gathered at Graceland wasn't there to ask for anything. They came to prove that kindness creates more kindness, and that Elvis had started something much bigger than he ever imagined. One hungry fan and one shared meal had inspired an entire movement of compassion. This story reminds us that small acts of kindness can ripple outward in ways we can't imagine. When was the last time you recognized someone in need and did something about it? Your actions create effects in your community that you might never see. If you have memories or family stories about Elvis that go beyond the music, share them in the comments below. And if you appreciate stories like this one, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.